throw another moon at me, and I'm gonna lose it.
Stark.
You know me?
I do. You're not the only one cursed with knowledge.
My only curse is you.
All that for a drop of blood. You have my respect, Stark. When I'm done, half of humanity will still be alive. I hope they remember you.
Stop! Spare his life, and I will give you the stone.
No tricks.
Don't.
One to go.
Where is he? Did we just lose? Why would you do that? We're in the end game now.
I am inevitable. Iron Man.
Welcome to Mr. Screen. In the Marvel multiverse, several problems have already occurred, but now with Tony Stark becoming Doom, many hitherto unanswered questions are emerging. In today's story, I will bring the moment of Stark's transformation into Doom. Without further ado, let's get straight to the point. Tony Stark's awakening into a new reality. Tony Stark slowly opened his eyes. The sensation was unlike anything he had ever experienced. He remembered the intense glow of the Infinity Gauntlet, the weight of the jewels channeling unimaginable power through his body, and the certainty that that act would lead to his death. But now he was all alive. He looked around. The floor was black marble, reflecting a light that seemed to come from nowhere, and the walls were covered in glowing runes, inscribed in a language he couldn't understand. Suddenly, a deep, authoritative voice echoed through the room. "Welcome, Anthony Stark." Tony turned around, his mind already going into analytical mode. The figure that emerged from the shadows was imposing, dressed in green armor and a cape that floated lightly in the air. The hood partially concealed his face, but the metallic shine of the mask was unmistakable. It was Victor Von Doom, the monarch and genius he knew only from stories and confidential files. "Doom," muttered Tony, feeling his voice weaker than he would have liked. Finally, continued Doom, his voice full of control and a hint of satisfaction. "The moment I've been waiting for since the day you were born." Tony frowned. "What the hell do you mean by that? I remember saving the universe. I died, right? So what is this? Some kind of crazy purgatory?" "Not exactly," replied Doom. "You did not die, Stark. You transcended. I brought you here to a dimension where time and reality flow differently. Here, you are not just the man who sacrificed himself. You are more, or at least less will be." Tony tried to process the words, but his mind was full of questions. "Why me? What do you want from me?" Doom crossed his arms, as if the answer was obvious. "You're a genius, just like me. But more than that, you're a soul forged by ambition, pain, and the never-ending quest for control. From the moment you were born, I saw in you a reflection of what I could have been in another life. Now, you will be something even greater, Doom. The reveal of Doom." Tony couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You want me to be you? That's insane, even by your standards." Doom stepped forward, his boots echoing on the marble floor. "Haven't you noticed, Stark? Your destiny has always been intertwined with mine. Your inventions, your quest for power and control, even the sacrifice you made, all of it has brought you here. You have the intellect, but you give you the vision. Under my guidance, you will be able to rule not only this world, but all worlds." Tony let out a bitter laugh. "And why exactly would I agree to this? I've done enough for the universe, and I don't need a dictator in a medieval costume telling me what to do." Doom raised a hand, and the mood around Tony began to change. He saw flashes of other worlds, universes devastated, alternate versions of himself repeatedly failing to save those he loved. "Look, Doom. You, in every version of yourself, are destined to fail. That is because you operate under the limitations of a mortal man. Under my guidance, you will become something greater. Not a hero, but a sovereign." Stark's inner struggle. Tony stepped back, feeling the weight of the visions Doom was showing him. He knew Doom was a manipulator, but he couldn't ignore the truth of some of the things he had seen. All his life he had fought to protect the world, but it seemed his efforts were never enough. Was Doom right? Did he need to transcend what he was to really make a difference? But then he remembered what kept him going, what had driven him to snap his fingers, even though he knew it would cost him his life, the hope that people could be better. "I understand what you're trying to do, Doom," Tony said finally. "But there's one thing you never understood. It's not about control. It's about giving people the chance to be better. And that's something you can never teach." Doom tilted his head, as if considering Tony's words. "Maybe you're right, Stark. But don't worry. I have ways to convince you." Before Tony could react, Doom raised his hands, and glowing runes began to swirl around him. Tony felt his body being immobilized, as a wave of dark energy flooded his mind. He screamed, fighting the invasion, but he felt something shift inside him, as if a seed was being planted. The awakening of a new Doom. When Tony opened his eyes again, he felt different. He was in armor he had never seen before, a hybrid of his technology and Doom's aesthetic. It was elegant and terrifying at the same time. "Now, Stark," said Doom, watching with satisfaction. "You are my successor. The real Doom." But something inside Tony still resisted. He knew he couldn't just give in to Doom's rule. Using his intelligence and the skills he still possessed, he began to manipulate the armor from within, reconfiguring it for his own purposes. While Doom was distracted by his grandiose plans, Tony was finally able to take full control of the armor. "You may have underestimated me, Doom," he said, his voice echoing through the room. "But I'm not just a genius. I'm Tony Stark." He attacked Doom with everything he had, starting a battle that shook the entire dimension. Stark's return. After an intense fight, Tony managed to escape Doom's dimension, but he knew that something had changed within him. The seed that Doom had planted was still there, and he feared what would happen if it germinated. Back in his world, Tony was greeted with surprise and relief by the Avengers, but he knew the fight against Doom was far from over. Doom wasn't just a man, he was an idea, and ideas were hard to destroy. As he worked on his new armor, Tony reflected on what he had learned. He knew he would need to face Doom again, but this time he would be prepared. He would not just fight for himself, but for the entire universe he swore to protect. And so, Tony Stark began planning his next great battle, knowing that Doom's shadow would always be with him, but also that his resolve was unwavering. The looping in Stark's mind. Tony was in his workshop, fine-tuning the design of his new armor, but something was wrong. His thoughts were confused, as if an invisible presence was infiltrating his mind. He felt a stab of pain in his head, and suddenly everything around him went dark. When he opened his eyes, he was no longer in his workshop. He was back in that strange, dark dimension. The black marble floor, the glowing runes on the walls, and in the center, the figure of Victor Von Doom. "Welcome back, Stark," said Doom with a tone of irony. Tony took a step back, confused. "What is this? I already left here. I fought you, I won, and I returned to my world. Is this a trick?" Doom laughed, a deep, menacing sound that echoed throughout the room. "No, Stark. This is not a trick. This is reality. You may have physically escaped, but you never left this place. From the moment I planted the seed in your mind, you have always been here with me. We are one now." Tony shook his head, trying to resist the idea. "That's a lie. I'm Tony Stark. I'm Iron Man, and no one controls my mind." Doom stepped forward, his presence overwhelming. "Stark, always so stubborn. You can fight all you want, but the truth is inevitable. Every time you try to escape, you only reinforce the cycle. See for yourself." Looping begins. Suddenly, Tony was back in the workshop, as if nothing had happened. He looked around, taking a deep breath, convincing himself that it was just a nightmare. But then, the pain in his head returned, more intense this time, and he found himself once again in Doom's dimension. "No," shouted Tony. "This isn't happening." Doom was there, unfazed. "You can't escape, Stark. You're stuck in this cycle, and every time you come back, part of you becomes more like me." The cycle repeated itself countless times. Tony tried to find a pattern, a way to escape, but each attempt ended at the same point. Doom's laugh and returned to the dark dimension. With each iteration, Tony felt his resistance weaken, his mind fragmenting. The final corruption. After countless cycles, something changed. Tony didn't scream when he returned to Doom's dimension. He was sitting on the black marble floor, tired, with his hands over his face. Doom approached, his voice now soft, almost fatherly. "You're starting to understand, aren't you, Doom? Resistance is futile. Your mind is no longer yours. You and I are one. Accept it, and this will all end." Tony raised his head, his eyes carrying a different shine, something that mixed resignation and acceptance. "If we are one," he said slowly, "then I'm not Tony Stark anymore." The rise of the new Doom. Tony Stark was standing in the heart of a gigantic fortress built in the middle of the void of the dark dimension. His hands touched the cold metal of an imposing throne, carved with intricate details of runes and circuitry. It was no longer Doom's throne, but his own, the fusion of Stark's intellect and Victor Von Doom's magical strength. His eyes glowed an icy blue, his expression cold as steel. In his mind, everything made sense now. He was no longer Tony Stark. He wasn't just Victor Von Doom. He He was something beyond that, a new entity that fused science and magic into a single vision of absolute power. The Avengers, Stark said to himself, his voice echoing through the empty room. They will be the biggest obstacle. They need to be eliminated. Doom, still an ethereal presence in his mind, laughed softly. Finally, Stark, you see the truth. Resistance is futile. They cling to antiquated ideas of heroism, but you can shape the multiverse in your image. Tony didn't respond immediately. He turned to a holographic monitor, where multiple timelines and dimensions intersected. Each showed the familiar faces of his former allies. Steve Rogers leading an attack in one universe, Thor lifting Mjolnir in another, Wanda manipulating reality in a third. They won't understand, muttered Tony. They never understand. The first steps. Tony began building his new legion, a mix of advanced technology and arcane magic. Metallic creatures endowed with artificial intelligence and enchanted runes began to take shape, each programmed with a single mission: hunt and subdue the Avengers. However, something bothered him. Even as he accepted his new identity, fragments of his old life still emerged. He walked through the fortress, muttering to himself, Steve has always been stubborn, never gives up. Thor is impetuous but predictable. And Natasha, well, she always finds a way. How can I defeat them when I train them to overcome impossible challenges? Doom's voice echoed in his mind, cutting through his thoughts. That's the beauty of it, Stark. You know them better than anyone. Use that against them. Destroy them from the inside out. Tony stopped, reflecting. An idea began to form. If I can't beat them as Doom, then I will beat them as Stark. The first target, Steve Rogers. Tony knew that Steve Rogers, Captain America, would be the first to suspect something was wrong. He also knew that Steve valued friendship and loyalty above all else. Using advanced holographic projection, Tony sent a message directly to Avengers headquarters. In the conference room, Steve, Sam Wilson, and Natasha Romanoff watched the message. Steve, began Tony, his voice full of emotion, if you're seeing this, then something has gone terribly wrong. Need your help. Sam crossed his arms. That seems strange. Stark is dead. We saw it with our own eyes. Natasha looked closely at the hologram. He's not lying, at least not directly. Something's going on. Steve, always confident in his intuition, frowned. If there's a chance that Tony is alive, we can't ignore it. He's one of our own. The trap. When Steve arrived at the indicated location, he found himself in a dark room, empty except for a single chair. He walked cautiously, the shield strapped to his back. Tony, are you here? Steve called. Suddenly, lights came on, revealing Tony sitting at a table with a glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked younger, more confident than ever. Steve, Tony said, smiling. You came. I knew you would. Steve narrowed his eyes. Tony, what's going on? You're supposed to be dead. Tony took a long drink of whiskey before answering. Dead? I don't think so. But changed. Yes, completely. Steve took a step forward, but before he could react, runes began to glow around the room, trapping him in a magical force field. What are you doing? Steve demanded. Tony stood up, his expression turning cold. You have always been the heart of the Avengers, Steve, but hearts can be broken. You wouldn't understand the new vision I have for the multiverse. So I'll start with you. Without Captain America, the others will fall. The other Avengers. Sam and Natasha, worried about Steve's delay, decided to investigate. They found the screening room empty, but Natasha, always meticulous, noticed something wrong. These runes. Stark has never worked with this before. This isn't just technology. It's something more. Sam looked around uneasily. If this isn't just Stark, then what are we dealing with? As the two argued, Tony's voice echoed in the room. Natasha, Sam, always so vigilant. But this isn't something you can solve with a makeshift plan. Suddenly, enchanted drones appeared, attacking the duo. Natasha and Sam fought skillfully, but the drones were different, almost unstoppable. Natasha shouted, This is not the work of the Stark we know. Something has changed in him. The truth revealed. While the remaining Avengers tried to unravel the mystery, Stark, now completely transformed like Doom, continued to spread his influence across the multiverse. He used what he knew about each of his former allies to manipulate and destroy their resistance. In a final confrontation with Thor and Wanda, Stark revealed his true identity. "I'm not Tony Stark anymore," he said, his voice carrying a strange power. "I am Doom, and you're not just enemies. You are tools. Each of you is a piece in my puzzle to dominate the multiverse." Wanda tried to use her magic to confront him, but Stark was now a master of both science and magic. He laughed as he deflected her attacks. "You think you can defeat me? I'm inevitable." Thor advanced with Mjolnir, but Stark stopped him with a simple gesture, imprisoning the god of thunder in arcane chains. Multiversal domination. With each Avenger fallen, Stark consolidated his power. He created a legion of followers and began conquering dimension after dimension, always facing new versions of the heroes he once called friends. But in a distant corner of the multiverse, a figure watched. A shadow, patiently waiting for the right moment to challenge Stark Doom and restore balance. The multiverse would never be the same again. Continues. So what did you think of this story? You've come this far, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and see you in the next video. Bye.